What's going on, NPA fans? Johnny GB here, bringing you guys the post draft power rankings. But what's power rankings without a co host? And I am joined by Tone, coach in the NPL minors.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? You got Tone here, and I am happy to be bringing you these power rankings for season 4 of the National Pokemon Association, along with my good buddy Johnny GB. It's always a pleasure to have you joining me on these sorts of things, man.
I'm actually excited. This is the first time I'm going to be doing power rankings for a full season. I have very minimal experience in doing power rankings. So this was actually
I
very
hear
hard to
you
do.
on that, my friend. I definitely understand that.
So, pretty much what we're going to do to break it down is we're going to give you the pros, the cons, and where we put the teams on our respective list. That's what you guys see on the screen. And kicking it off on number 24 for myself, I have the Nashville Predators. Now, this is going to be completely different on where Tone had them, but for me, it was based on their team synergy. I saw no team synergy on this team. You have very minimal ground resist. You have Superior as your one resist, Noivern and Masquerain as your immunities. Not very thing to have happen when you have Blacephalon, Neo King, Cobalion, Lantern, Megaturnitar, Klefki. Just a lot of things weak to ground, and none of those really synergize together.
Yeah, for my case, I have number 24. I have the Atlanta Arcanines. And the main reason why I have them, it's kind of weird that you think with a team consisting of a Mega Venusaur, a Heatran, a Clefable, and a Gliscor, you're probably wondering how can a team with that such good defensive synergy be dead last? Well, the main issue I had with the team was pretty much everything else around that core. Basically, to start off with like the speed tier. So his fastest Pokemon on this team was the Crobat. I have nothing against Crobat. It's kind of just everything else that follows Crobat. If you just go down the list, his next fastest Pokemon after 130, it drops all the way down to base 95 speed with the Electivire and the Gliscor. So you're allowing fast frail mons, like say for example like Greninja, Weavile. You're allowing them to run adamant, modest nature against your bulk, which is very, very difficult for them to maintain that level of sustainability and defensive capabilities for your team. Not to mention the fact that your speed control is limited to a Cricketune, which is not the most reliable thing in terms of something you want to have some sort of speed control. You want to have something a little bit better. I know you have like Thunderwave, Clefable, but you don't really want to be bringing something like that every week. And on top of that, you're really lacking in the priority department. Like just to scrape the bottom of the barrel here, like your main priority is basically just Quick Attack Crobat and Shadow Sneak Dusclops. That is not something that's really going to pop into your opponent's head every time they come in team build against you. So while your bulk is great, everything else is just kind of uh, a very hit and miss in my opinion. Not to say that your team is bad, and there's just like some very, very flawed system in terms of like your speed and whatnot. I think you can like patch it up a little bit with trying to get some faster mods to deal with these sort of weaknesses. Like it's too bulky. Like you can never have too much bulk, but there's an instance of having too much, and I feel like this team is sort of what fits that description, especially considering your wall breaker is literally just coming down to Electivire for the most part. So and in a sense Dragalge, but Dragalge isn't fast. So just something that can be taken advantage of on a weekly basis by your opponent. So with that being said, I really want to move to number 23. And for number 23, I have the Tampa Bay Lux Rays. This one's a little bit more intense in the sense that this was just straight up rain offense, I see. And not saying that I ranked them low because it was rain, not because rain is a very strong playstyle. It's more of the sense that he was fully dedicated to rain and everything, well, pretty much almost everything on his team benefited from rain in some way, shape, or form. You have stuff, you have the Thunderous Eye, you have the Pelipper, Kingdra, Mega Swampert, you have your other electric immunity like Tokidamaru, you have stuff that benefit from the rain being up, stuff like Shaman and Heracross, which share the fire weakness. And then you have Bronzong also has the advantage of the rain itself. And then your way of dealing with stuff outside of rain is literally just coming down to Zoroark and Snorlax. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he can mitigate, not really mitigate, but more so invent some sort of strategy that doesn't involve rain, especially considering where teams do have opposing weather that can he can face against, like Alola Ninetales or Sand Offense or something like that. It's gonna be very, very difficult to try to keep the rain up for the rest of his squad. So that's pretty much gonna be it from me for number 23. So why don't you explain why you have your number 23 pick of the Southampton Sharpedos, Johnny?
So, looking at the Southampton Torpedoes, you have a decent amount of bulk. You have Togekiss, you have Chestnut, Mega Scizor. So, good start there. You have a Volt Turn combination with Rotom Fan, Mega Scizor. But for me, when I was looking at the team initially, you have a fire resist of Alolan Marowak, which is decent, more so on the Slowbro end. But it was just to me missing the bulk that it really needed for the Mega Scizor Garchomp team. I see a lot of Mega Scizor Garchomp paired together, and I was just really underwhelmed by the bulk that this team had and felt like it could have been a little bit better. Now, granted, I know this is a 24 coach draft, so I mean, the possibilities of snipes and whatnot are extremely high. But to me, again, it was a very similar issue to the um, Predators was I didn't really see mons that fit well together. Yes, Garchomp Togekiss fit well together. Garchomp Mega Scizor fit really nicely together, but after that, nothing really stuck out that went well together. You have a lot of physically defensive mons with Chestnut Slowbro. Not enough specially defensive mons. The best specially defensive mon on the roster right now is Skuntank, along with possibly a specially defensive Togekiss. So you look at some versatile mons like Greninja, Weavile, they do very well against these teams. These fast, frail Pokemon do very well against a team like this, simply because of their ability to run different moves, coverage wise, to hit everything on the team. That's where I see the major flaw with the Southampton Sharpedos. Granted, this is only post draft, and the coaches were able to make changes post draft, so we will bring that week one. But that's to me was the one issue was the team didn't synergize well in my eyes.
All right. So with that being said, we can move on to number 22. I have the Cedar Rapids Thunderous at number 22, and Johnny has the Atlanta Arcanines, which I already touched on earlier. So with my ranking of the Cedar Rapids Thunderous, I do like the team concept. I'm not gonna lie. There was a couple of things I wanted to note were like Toxapex Ferrothorn being a very solid defensive core, and then he has a Mega Charizard X. I think the main thing for me was why I had them so low was I think it really would have benefited more if he had a more potent wall breaker to pair with Zard X. Like he has some good Pokemon. He has things like the Sneasel, which can be banded. He does give him priority. Staraptor is great and everything. But I would really prefer it if I saw some sort of way of having a wall breaker that wasn't also weak to Stealth Rock like the Charizard X. Also on top of that, his way of getting rid of hazards is very, very iffy. It's limited to just Default Staraptor and a Hitmontop, which, and I think Jump Bluff, I could be wrong about that. But other than that, I think it's just more of the fact that he's relying on the defensive capabilities of Toxapex plus Ferrothorn to tank hits and then trying to wear things down in the late game for Mega Charizard X. But I think pairing up Zard X with like a better Rapid Spinner, if you can try to get one in free agency, would definitely be beneficial. For one, Gardevoir is also a very, very good Pokemon to have, just for the fact that they're getting access to Healing Wish to help out Zardex in case it does get weakened. But more or less, I do like the team. Um, I just want to see him as some sort of breaker, and it's probably a more beneficial way of getting rid of hazards. So Charizard isn't taking 50% of health before a Mega evolves and whatnot. So with that, we'll leave it to Johnny to see why he has the Atlanta Arcanines at number 22.
So you touched on the Atlanta Arcanines pretty well. That there is such thing as enough bulk, but there is such thing as too much bulk on the team, and that's what you really get with this. And again, you touched on those speed tiers. The speed tiers are awful on this team. You go from the base 130 to Crobat to 95 without anything in between there. So now you're vulnerable to Pokemon like the Greninja, the Weavile, even stuff maybe around the 115 range, the Raikous, stuff like that just really dents this team now. Venutran's been a thing since Gen 6. Everybody's been all about Mega Venusaur Heatran. But at this time, he doesn't seem to have the right support to really back up the Mega Venusaur Heatran core. You look at some of those shared weaknesses that he has on the team. You have Ferroseed, another grass type, paired with another poison type. The fire switch-ins is really just the Heatran and the Mantine. What is nice is the
And Dragology.
and Dragology to an extent, not so much on the physical side, but special side, it can take
True.
very well. But speed, Clefable, Thunderwave, with the 90 accuracy, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing as 70 at this point now. And then just Sticky Web Cricketune, with there being so much removal added into the game from the move tutors, the value of sticky webs has really just decreased because almost everything in their mother gets hazard removal now. You get stuff Superior, Clef Key. I believe Jump Puff actually gets defog as well. So I mean, there's just so much with hazard removal that it makes Sticky Web a less reliable source of speed control, and especially with it being your only sort of hazard setup outside of Gliscor and Clefable, it's kind of a given that they're going to bring hazard removal for that Cricketune. So, I mean, that's the main reason I have the Atlanta Arcanines so low. But with all that being said, moving on to number 21. Now, I ranked the best team name in the NPA, the Tapu Koko Puffs, at number 21. Now, there's some things I took issue. One, there is no good electric resist on this team. You have Rhyperior, but now that brings in HP Grass. Now, if he would have added a potential water ground type to bring in the HP Grass, HP Ice issue into play, it would have been interesting, but Rhyperior is the only electric immunity on a team that has Murkrow, Mega Pidgeot, Gyarados. You do have the Tapu Bulu, which does help out with Earthquake resistance for Nihilego, Darmanitan, and the Rhyperior. But besides that, I mean, it's a pretty frail team. You have Cresselia, Blissey. You pretty much hit those with the Toxic. And anytime you hit Cresselia with the Toxic, it's a good day. That's pretty much what you do with that. But you look at the hazard removal, Pidgeot, Murkrow, Hitmonchan, not the greatest hazard removal, especially on a team with Gyarados, Vikavolt, Darmanitan that take 25% upon entry. But it does have good hazard setup. You have Toxic Spice, Stealth Rock, Nihilego. You also have Stealth Rock with Blissey and Rhyperior, so there are positive, but there are a couple things to fix, especially with that ginormous electric weakness that he does have on the team.
I do agree with that. So my pick for the Munchlax United at number 21 was mainly due to the fact that when I see the team structure, like I feel like he was trying to have some sort of synergetic core with Megalophony and then having the Necrozma. But the issue kinda is like sort of everything else around it in a sense. Like he does have the sort of triple water core of Quillfish, Greninja, and Suicune. And also, as you touched on with the type of Cocoa Puffs, his electric immunity is limited to just Palossand, and then everything else is just kind of just trying to not take an electric attack for the most part. He does have Audino, but Audino is the type of Pokemon that you can try to bring on a weekly basis at the very least. And I feel like his team is just kind of um all over the place at the very least. He does have, like I mentioned, three water type Pokemon, two psychic type Pokemon. Like he developed on a lot of types. I think he was trying to do something in terms of having some sort of setup with the Necrozma and then have everything else around it. He has like toxic spikes and spikes with Greninja, bulky water type with Suicune, another bulky water type with Quillfish, which I don't think he would really need. I think if he got like another grounded poison type in that sort of sense, like I think that was his reasoning for going for Quillfish, was just trying to get a toxic spike absorber. But I think getting another grounded poison type instead of having another electric immunity or having another electric weakness would be beneficial in the long run. And other than that, he doesn't really have anything in terms of breaking potential outside of the Megalopony, which does help against offensive teams. But everything past the Megalopony and to the extent the Greninja is sort of just focusing on trying to tank hits and wear things down for Megalopony or the Necrozma sweep. Not saying it's going to be difficult for Bub to try to pull off, but it will be interesting to see how he tries to manage that sort of team where so many Pokemon are weak to one type and you don't really have much in terms of the sense of dealing with it. Well, he does have the Raikou, but that's not really an electric immunity. It's a resist, and it does get worn down pretty easily with not lack of reliable recovery. So it's going to be interesting to see how he tries to mitigate that sort of weakness on his draft. So moving on to number 20, I have the type of Cocoa Puffs at number 20. Johnny has the Colorado Rapidash. As you touched on with the type of Cocoa Puffs, he doesn't really have the best electric resist. He has the Rhyperior, but I think this is more so of the fact that this is, as mentioned, I think it's a VGC player moving into draft league format. So he did grab a lot of Pokemon, which he is comfortable using in the VGC format, the Bulu, Nihilego, the Vikavolt. He got the thickness with the Blissey Cresselia core, which is going to be super annoying for opposing teams to face. The Gyarados, again, another Pokemon that can be run very, very bulky. So his route of going on the bulky offensive side is going to be a little bit problematic for certain teams. Outside of that, he does, like you mentioned, the hazard removal could be better. Just having Mega Pidgeot, Murkrow, Hitmonchan as forms of hazard removal isn't the best, isn't something you're going to be want to bring on a regular basis, especially with other Pokemon being weak to Stealth Rock, like the Darmanitan, which is your real heavy hitter. In most cases, Tabulu can be a hard hitting Pokemon too. But more often than not, I think this team is a little bit more synergetic than led to believe. But I think the main issue is he's going to be relying a little bit more on Blissey, Cresselia, Gyarados to tank those hits, and then having Bulu to with the grassy terrain to mitigate the ground weakness of the Rhyperior, which also hinders Rhyperior because Stab Earthquake won't be hitting that hard on the opposing team. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But he is a VGC player getting adjusted to draft league format, so I didn't hinder him too much in the sense that he does have some experience to get with this team, and so it'll be interesting to see how he does with his draft. So why don't you talk about why you have the Colorado Rapidash at number 20?
So, initial take, I was looking at it. You have the three ghost weaknesses, being Mimikyu, Gourgeist, and Rotom, which isn't a bad thing because you took three of the ghost types that are available in the draft format. There's not many of them. The only ones I can name off the top of my head, I mean, you have Mismagius, Gengar, Blacephalon as three of the predominant ghost types in the draft format.
And Mimikyu. Don't forget the Mimikyu.
But at first glance, I really wasn't a fan of the team. And the more I actually sat down breaking down the team, I'm actually more fond of it. You do have a good Fairy Dragon Steel core, Latios, Mimikyu, Mega Aggron. Although Mimikyu doesn't really act as a fairy type very often, you can run it bulky, fast Mimikyu, but it does have very good setup options with its ability to disguise. Has two very solid stealth rockers in Mega Aggron and Infernape. And you have some setup sweepers with Latios, Dragon Dance, or Calm Mind. You have Dragon Dance for Alligator, Quiver Dance Venomoth. So I mean, there's the options on setup there, which I kind of ignored the first time ranking this team. But the overall actual breaking relies on a lot of setup in my eyes. You look at for Alligator, it wants to click Dragon Dance. Mimikyu, you either want to click Z Bulk Up or Swords Dance. So there's a lot of setup that this team really wants to do for it to actually have breaking power. But all in all, I mean, it's a very balanced team, and I kind of wish I put this even higher on my rankings after sitting down and breaking down the team. So call it an underdog, call it overlooked by the analysts in some eyes, in which they win week one, probably jump up quite a bit due to how underranked I had them this week. But moving on to my number 19 team, I decided to put the Tampa Bay Lux Rays, which you had at 23. And I actually love this team. The rain is a perfect thing for league format and even better for a 24 player draft, in which there's very few ways that you can really get rid of the rain other than manual setup. You have Alolan Ninetales, Torkoal as two of the other predominant weather users, along with Tyranitar, Hippowdon, and Gigalith. But the way that he has this rain team set up, he does have options for a non-rain team. When you look at Togedemaru, Zoroark, Bronzong, Thunderous Eye is not really reliant on rain. It's a very good dual dance setup sweeper that could potentially clean up games. Then you have Snorlax and Heracross, both of which can set up and win games as well. The rain is the predominant factor, but it does have some very hidden gems there with the Thunderous Eye and the Snorlax, both of which are Pokemon that I love using in the Draft League format. I feel like they're very overlooked Pokemon in terms of the draft. So I can see this team, albeit starting pretty low in the rankings early on in the season, has very good potential to be towards the top of the rankings just because rain is one of those concepts that pretty much any player can pick up and have some form of success with. And for your number 19, tell us about why you have the Orlando Magikarp down there.
Okay, so with the Orlando Magikarp, it was actually very difficult to rank them this low, especially considering that they have a very solid Dragon Fairy Steel Core with Jirachi Florges and the Dragonite. And I think the main thing I had a little bit of an issue with was, again, like previous teams, was a real lack of a decent electric check. I mean, you have Lightning Rod main net trick in tier 5, then you have Claydol, which is not really the first thing that comes to people's minds in terms of an electric check. I think the other thing to note about the Orlando Magikarp's team is um, their removal is sort of iffy at the very least. They have the Gyarados, which does a 25% of loses 25% of its health with Stealth Rock prior to Mega Evolving. Same thing with Dragonite, trying to keep its HP at full for multi-scale to be in full effect. And your main removal just comes down to Claydol and I believe Florges, and I think Drifloon also gets defogged too. But it's a lot of rock weak Pokemon, and your only real rock resist is basically just your Jirachi. And you have a couple of other Pokemon weak to rocks. You have Ninetales and you have Entei. So the other thing I do like about this team is he does have an underrated Sun Core with the Venusaur Ninetales combination going on. So that can surprise some people in terms of team matchup. And he does have the Dragonite, which can be a solid setup sweeper with Z Fly, Dragonium Z, and all that stuff. But I think having a more potent electric check and another way of removing hazards would be beneficial. It will be interesting to see how he does play this team. It does look very solid, which is why I kind of was it was kind of difficult for me to rank them this low just because. But at the very least, he does have a lot of things going for this team, and it's going to be interesting to see how he does try to manage this sort of team, despite the fact that he does have some mitigating weaknesses like the rock weakness, the electric weakness on this team too. So he's going to be relying a lot on Florges if he doesn't bring Magnetric or the Claydol to deal with electric type Pokemon. So like I said, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how he tries to utilize this sort of draft. So, moving on to number 18 here in our rankings, I have the Los Angeles Landers at number 18, and you have the New York Lynx. So, for the Los Angeles Landers, it's a very interesting concept with the fact that he does have a very solid draft with the Latias, Weavile, Azelf. It's a very solid team. But the main reason why I have them a little bit lower than some other people is kind of the fact that again, it's sort of a team that you don't really see much in terms of some sort of synergy. I mean, it's there in terms of stuff like Arcanine, Tentacruel. They can cover each other's weaknesses. You have Registeel that can take sponge special hits and be a fairy check for the most part. But I think it comes down to the fact that, well, for starters, he doesn't really have much in terms of stealth rock users. For one, he does have Registeel, Mega Aerodactyl, and the Azelf, and that's really it. So he's going to be kind of pressured to bring either like a lead Azelf with Stealth Rock or Stealth Rock on Registeel if he really needs those rocks in a hurry. I think the other thing to note is the fact that his team in and of itself is sort of Stealth Rock weak. Two with Megarodactyl, Weavile, Arcanine losing 25% of its health, and Tentacruel is the primary way of getting rid of hazards on this team. And aside from that, in having Defog, forcing Latias to bring Defog or forcing Mega Aerodactyl to bring Defog if he decides to go that route could be a little bit problematic. I know he's going to want that extra move slot for like another coverage move or setup sweeper or something like that. So I think the main thing, like his team does look pretty solid. It does have some pretty awesome speed tiers. It has good priority and whatnot. But it's just going to come down to how does he handle stuff like rocks and um, like stuff like stealth rock, stuff like spike stack and stuff like that. So with that being said, why don't you talk about why you have the New York Lynx at number 18?
All right, Papa, see if you're ready. We're going to start with that tier 3 pick right there. Looking at Fortress as one of those mons in draft league format that is probably in the top 5 of most hyped. Everybody loves Fortress for some odd reason. It sets up spikes, toxic spikes, stealth rocket, volt switches. But it's also setup fodder. And that was pretty much what I saw with the Fortress is I saw setup fodder. And you look at the rest of his team, it's very, very frail for the most part in some of the Pokemon. You have Raichu, not switching into anything. You have Mega Absol, it's not switching into much at all. You have Toxicroak, not switching into much at all. Delphox, same thing. Where his real bulk lies is with Swampert, Tank, Tapu Fini, and to an extent Goodra, but Goodra is still not switching into any type of physical attack. So I do like the Fini Goodra core. I mean, Goodra's not using a dragon type move very often. With Goodra's coverage, it's not really hindered by the misty terrain. And in fact, it's actually benefited because it can't be toxic, which is a very good thing. But when you look at just the rest of the draft, speed tiers are actually pretty solid. You go 121 with Tornadus down to Mega Absol, down to Raichu. So you got the speed tiers covered, but when you actually look at reliable bulk, you have Swampert, bulky water, it gets worn down very easily. Trevenant, it's an okay grass type. I don't think it's the one that actually fits this team a little bit better. When I'm actually looking at a grass type to put on this team, one that probably doesn't have I don't want to say ghost weakness because he does have Mega Absol, but then again, Mega Absol is not really switching into a ghost type move. So, I mean, it was just looking at that Fortress, and it was just that glaring thing that just staring at me. Like, of all the things that could set up hazards, there's a lot of hazard setters in Tier 3. Why make that your only real sense of removal? Yes, Tornadus does get defog, so does Fini. Why do you make that one source of removal when you can grab maybe a different steel type. So that's the one thing that bugged me about his team, was just staring at that fortress. It's just one of those Pokemon that, to me, just really didn't fit in with the rest of his team. So moving on to number 17, I have the United Kingler. And for Tone, he does
I
United Kingler as well. So one of the few times we're actually going to agree in these power rankings. And my take on the United Kingler, where are my notes on them? Why can't I find them? Or you can go first while I find my notes on them.
All right, so basically for the United Kingler, I did like the concept of it. They had a very solid sand core with T-Tard, Stoutland, and the Mega Alakazam. I think it was just kind of the sense that I think it was a little bit too much in the sense of trying to have the sand and the Mega Alakazam work. They did have some other pretty good options with Stack Attacka and Jordagon. Totally think it's a little bit interesting for your fairy type Pokemon. It's going to be pretty interesting to see how that does work. It is pretty bulky. It's a nice dragon switch in. It does get defog and all that stuff. So I think the main note to take out of this, and the fact that he also has Buzzwole too, I think it's going to be a little bit more pressure to try to switch in on fighting attacks because he did draft a few Pokemon that are weak to fighting. He does have some decent. He does have good resists. Like I said, with the Buzzwole, Granbull, the Gligar. But outside of the Buzzwole and the Gligar, nothing else really has reliable recovery. And on top of that, I think it's going to be a little bit pressured a bit to try to bring something like a Trick Room Sakataka, which does benefit from Tyranitar's Sand, but again, having the sand up and then having something like Stoutland trying to sweep late game might be a little bit forced in the sense. I'm not saying that Stoutland's a bad Pokemon, of course, but it's going to be also very difficult to justify bringing Stoutland on a regular basis. It is a solid sand sweeper, not really on the lines of something like Excadrill or maybe to an extent like in Rock Midday, which does get better coverage and is faster. But overall, I do like the concept of the team, and of course, he does have the some like Volcanion to take those water attacks, which can hinder um, pretty much its entire team, as it is kind of physically oriented in a sense with the Buzzwole, Tyranitar, stuff like that. So, John can give his take on the United Kingler if he has his notes now.
Yeah, so pretty much basis going off your basis is he does have a lot of physically offensive Pokemon, which is something I really like seeing. Is having your team so focused on one form of attacking. Now you do have Mega Alakazam Volcanion, which do give you some special attacking. But for the most part, the team is physically offensive, and there are some options he can do to change that to help balance it out. Well, very good ground resist, so that'll pair nicely with Tyranitar. They cover their weaknesses fairly well, actually, so that'll be a very good thing. Also, being a nice pursuit trapper for those bulky sidekicks that Buzzwole, depending on the move set, may or may not like. But looking at the rest of the team, you have Granbull, very nice heal beller. Something that people overlook on Granbull is it does get access to heal bell, which helps out with Tyranitar, Buzzwole, some Pokemon that can be burned. You do have one of my favorite Pokemon to use, Volcanion. Very good wall breaker. Access to good sets such as the Assault Vest with Flame Charge. The best set being Choice Specs because it just likes to damage everything with Steam Eruption. It's just a fire and water Primarina in my eyes. You bring it in, you're clicking one move most of the time, being Steam Eruption. So I enjoy the team, but there are some big flaws that need to be taken care of for the team to really work out in the long run. I think adding another Stealth Rocker would be beneficial, as Gligar is okay. So is Tyranitar, but just another reliable stealth rocker that may not have quite a few weaknesses. Will help out the United Kingler. Now, in at number 16 for myself, I have the Munchlaxter United, a team that you had much lower than where I have it. And for you, you have the Adelaide Honchcrows. So, getting into the Munchlaxter United, it was a team that I thought, you know what, this actually is very solid for Bub because you have Hazard Stack plus a Megalopony, but a very underrated wall breaker in Metagross. This is a Pokemon I think is a little overlooked. I know there's a couple people that like using Metagross, myself being included, but it's also very good at breaking down walls. I believe at 130 attack. So it does have a pretty good attack stat to damage Pokemon with access to pretty good setup moves being Rock Polish, Agility, whichever you prefer, Magnet Rise, Power Up Punch. So Metagross does have the ability to break alongside Megalopony. Now, some of the things that you did point out was triple water weakness. That's a no-no. That's what we crucified the Atlanta Arcanines, the Atlanta Arcanines over was having that triple water weakness. But the Palossand and Tangela, they're okay water resist. Tangela is actually underrated. It's a very good tier 5 grass type, especially with the Eviolite with its base 115 defense. Just makes it so much bulkier than it needs to be. And it does get access to reliable recovery, synthesis, leech seed, access to sleep powder. It can switch into ground types very well, so he's not having that issue. But your main passer to keep Metagross healthy is Audino. Now, I've used Audino quite a bit. It's kind of just there. There's no real reason to prep for it because there's nothing really it's going to do. It's going to wish, pass, protect, toxic, run one type of coverage move for something that's going to switch into it. But all in all, I think he has a very good thing going because Megalopony does force a lot of switches. So with the toxic spikes, stealth rocks, he can make sure that he wears down all of his opponent's Pokemon enough for Megalopony to pretty much just click return to win the game because there's not much that outspeeds Megalopony in the meta. So why don't you tell us about your number 16 being the Adelaide Honchcrows?
Yeah, so with Kreselke's team, I definitely like that fact that she does have the Zard Y paired up with Sand with Excadrill, Hippowdon, Excadrill being one of the best teammates to ask for in terms of pairing up with Mega Charizard Y to make sure that Stealth Rock is not going to be a factor in the battle for Charizard Y. The rest of her team also looks very, very solid support wise. I had a fair deal of success using stuff like Drapion. Kamala is a cool rapid spinner, doesn't have to worry about status conditions. She also has a good water type with Keldeo, can be a good special wall breaker, being Specs or Revenge Killer with Scarf. She doesn't have to be reliant on webs like the Atlanta Arcanine is, despite the fact she does have that Leavanny. She has the Whimsicott in the back, just Prankster Stun Spore can be a thing. Prankster Encore to cripple some set of Mons, and then she has the solid momentum with U-turn, pivoting in and out between Excadrill and the Zard Y. I think the main thing I would prefer if she would try to have another physical wall breaker to try to pair with the Excadrill. If anything, she does have Hippowdon, which is a very solid stealth rocker. Um, but I think outside of that, I would prefer if she had, for one, another stealth rocker aside from Hippowdon. She does have Excadrill, but I'm pretty positive that whenever you want to go into a battle with using an Excadrill, I'm pretty sure you don't want to waste of turn running rocks on Excadrill when it could be doing some other thing like spitting away hazards or getting off damage with Earthquake or Iron Head or Rock Slide. The other thing probably not really actually much to say about it. I mean, other than that, aside from like the Dusknoir, she doesn't really have much in terms of bulk. Aside from Hippowdon and Dusknoir, if you would can say that about it being bulky. Kamala can be bulky too. It does get access to Wish, so it can Wish past to Dusknoir if that's what she does choose to do. But overall, I do like the team. It is a bit solid. It's kind of a shame I had to put it so low considering all the other teams in the league. But outside of the lack of real bulk outside of Hippowdon and to an extent Dusknoir and Drapion can be run defensively as well. She does have a very solid team, so it's kind of hard to put her any lower than 16. So with that out of the way, let's move on to number 15, where you have the Cedar Rapids Thunderous and I have the Straw Hat Swamperts. So with the Straw Hat Swamperts, I did like um the pairing that he has. He has stuff like the Mew, which can pretty much come in and do any type of set that he wants. And then he has Mega Blastoise to pair with it. He does have some pretty solid things going for it. If I were to have to say or something to really knock his team on, would probably be the lack of some sort of like, well, he has like Duck Trio and Dodrio for like speed. He does have some priority and whatnot. But to me, outside of like Mew, it kind of feels like a little bit out of place, a little bit. Would just like to clarify, he does have like stuff like um, the Duck Trio, which can trap stuff, which is beneficial for something like Magneton having that double trapping core. But outside of that, he doesn't really have much to pivot into and like wall break for, if you want to call it that. Which is kind of difficult to say on a team that has some pretty good setup sweepers. Mainly the Situai can baton pass some stat boosts to maybe Duck Trio or Dodrio if it's like a choice scarf set, which can be pretty devastating if it does get someone like that going for it. But overall, I do like the overall concept of the team. It does look a little bit like mishmash just because the team does fit, but it doesn't really look that well on paper. But I do like the overall structure of what he has going for him. So with that being said, why don't you talk about your pick of number 15 for the Cedar Rapids Thunderous?
So you look at Cedar Rapids Thunderous, you got Toxic Ferrothorn, bulk. I mean, not much you can get past that with Reggie Rock, more bulk. I'm gonna knock them for having a reliable ground to switch in. Because once Charizard Mega evolves, your ground switch ins are Staraptor and a Jump Pluff. So your ground switch ins are a Staraptor, because Jump Pluff to me is not a Pokemon. So it's a very, I want to just say like a basic team. If you're going to tell people what to draft in draft format, you're going to recommend them Charizard. You're going to recommend them Pokemon like Sneasel, Gardevoir. So I really just like how simple this team is built, but it's very effective for what it needs to do. Now, it doesn't have much breaking power. That is knock number one. Is your breaking power comes from Mega Charizard X. That'll need to be taken care of immediately because you don't have any type of special wall breakers. You have a Galvantula, which is okay. Gardevoir is decent without really being able to set up with Gardevoir. It just doesn't have anything to really deal with those special walls. Now, Gardevoir is actually a very good Pokemon for this team because of Wish Passing ability, Healing Wish Passing ability into Mega Charizard X, like you stated, but also a very underrated Choice Scarf user. So that's something that coaches got to watch out for is the Choice Scarf Gardevoir to catch people off guard. So it's just a team that I thought It's very balanced. It's not overwhelming, and it's not really underwhelming. It's kind of just middle of the road team. And 15 to me felt like the good spot for it. You do have the Galvantula with a spin blocker and Golurk. Very nice pairing there. And Golurk's a little overlooked in terms of being a stealth rocker, choice band user. So I'm actually very excited to watch this team because of just the simplicity but the effectiveness of its team. And for number 14, I believe this was actually another one we agreed on.
I don't think so.
No,
I
it
have the
was not.
Colorado Rapidash, number 14. You have the Orlando Magikarp.
I think we skipped 15. Did we?
No, we just did 15.
It is late at night. For number 14, I have the Orlando Magikarp, which you ended up having at 20, I believe.
19.
19. So I looked at the Orlando Magikarp and I see Florges, Dragonite, Jirachi, and that's pretty much all I wanted to see from that draft because that is a very good Fairy Dragon Steel. Even though Florges is, I don't want to say passive, but a lot of the times you know the four moves that it's bringing. Now with Defog, maybe you know a fifth move and you're going to struggle trying to predict what four moves that it's going to bring. But you got versatility in Jirachi, from Choice Scarf to specially expensive Wish to possibly Choice Band, Choice Specs, Calm Mind, Sub Calm Mind. A lot of stuff Jirachi can do. And now you pair it with two very good wall breakers, Entei, Mega Gyarados. Two outstanding wall breakers and one very good setup sweeper. So you have Pokemon like Entei that damage a lot of things, Jirachi, Dragonite that damage a lot of things. But now you get a Mega Gyarados that can go in, water, stab move, Dragon Dance. Probably going to end the rest of the game once it sets up a Dragon Dance. It's a team that I actually really enjoyed. It is top heavy with Jirachi, Mega Gyarados, Dragonite, Entei. But you did point out there is a Ninetales and Venusaur combination. So you could potentially see Venusaur sweeps coming this season in the NPA, which I would love to see this season. For your number 14.
Okay, so as you touched on before with the Colorado Rapidash, you did go into the sense of his team is reliant in a sense on setup sweepers, stuff like Calm Mind Latios, Sword Stance Mimikyu, Infernape for Alligator. I actually think that's beneficial because of the fact that looking at his draft, he has the fact that so many of his mons has the ability to set up. It makes it a lot more difficult for the opponent to try to counter to him because anything can be that win con, especially considering that not everything has to be set up. Latios can be a choice scarf user. Crocodile can run choice scarf, and Fernape can run choice scarf. And more importantly, I think the main thing to note is the fact that he did have the bulk with Licky Licky, Mega Aggron. So Licky Licky passing wishes to Mega Aggron, keeping it healthy. It can run Stealth Rock, which frees up Crocodile to be a lot more of a potent threat. Um, Another thing to note is the fact that he does have also a good priority. Shadow Sneak Mimikyu, Aqua Jet for Alligator, Mach Punch, and Fernape. So I actually like this team a lot more. And I think one of the more underrated Pokemon on his draft definitely has to be that Venomoth. Venomoth is a lot more threatening than people think just because of the fact that Tinted Lens Bug Buzz hurts a lot. And it doesn't matter if every Pokemon on your team resists Bug. Tinted Lens Bug Buzz from a Venomoth, if it's set up, will still hurt immensely, even if it resists. I do question a little bit of having the double electric types with the Electabuzz and the Rotom Spin. But outside of that, I actually like the team a lot more just for the sense of having the option for everything to be a threat up and down this roster. And he does have the bulk to mitigate to rely on so that way his offense isn't so overwhelmed by opposing offense to say the least. So With that being said, we're going to move on to number 13 on the rankings. So you have the Miami Don fans, and I have the New York Knicks. So you touched on the New York Knicks a little bit before with the Tapo Finney Gujar combination. And the main knock, which I also agree with, is having that fortress. I also am not really a big fan of fortress in and of itself. But it's a steel type that can spike rapid spin and gives momentum with volt switch. So I guess he has that going for him. And of course, in a 24-person draft, it's very very difficult to actually get that bulky steel type for your team or a good steel type in general. So it's kind of hard to pass up trying to get fortress at that point. So I'm not really going to knock Papa C for that fortress pick as much as you did, but overall, I do like the structure, especially considering Tapo Finney's Misty Surge helps out a bunch of his bulk. It prevents Gudra from being status with Toxic. It prevents Swamper from being hit by Toxic. It prevents a lot of things. Like the only real knock, if you can really mention on his team, um, really is just a sense of having something to absorb toxic spike. He doesn't have the toxic croak though, so it's not that big of an issue. But I think having toxic trying to come in, absorb toxic spikes to bypass the Misty Surge will be a little bit problematic. But outside of that, I do like the overall structure of Papa C's team. I think the only real questionable pick is the Trevenant. I know he was trying to get some sort of ground resist, and if you look at his team outside of Torn, and I know Swampert can be EV to take ground attacks. Same thing with Fortress, but I think getting a more bulkier grass type or some grass type in the very sense or something to take down those ground attacks will be a little bit more beneficial. But overall, I do like the overall structure of how Papa C has his team set up. I think the only real thing I would probably knock on him is trying to get a more immediate breaker. Um, he does have hard hitters, yes, but nothing that really goes on the borderline of being a potent wall breaker. He does have some setup options with the Swords Dance Mega Absol, Calm Mind Delphox, Swords Dance Nasty Plot, Toxic Rogue. I think Toxic Rogue is going to be one of those underrated Pokemon because no one really sees Toxicroak used in League format, and it's actually a very, very potent threat if used properly. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Papa C uses these sort of Pokemon. So why don't we move on to why you have the Miami Don fans at number 13?
So I have the Miami Dawn fans down at 13 simply because Kyle is a Dolphins fan. No, but being serious here,
I sense the saltiness from the Patriots fan in the room, but okay.
looking at Kyle's team, you have a very good Volt turn combination here with Scizor and Jolteon. Granted, Scizor should not be a tier 1 pick, but we'll let it slide for now, just because it is a 24 coach draft. So you got Volturn with Scizor, Jolteon, good start. You have a very good mega, probably top 5 mega in the draft format, Mega Diancie. So that gives you magic mounts now, gives you a reliable fairy type as well. And then you also get Emboar, one of possibly the most underrated Pokemon in the format, just because of its breaking ability. So you have Volturn into Diancie, Emboar. Now the downside about Kyle's team is after Mega Diancie and Emboar, where is your offense? You have an Amoonguss, Mesprit, a Cryogonal, an Oricorio, a Shuckle, a Flygon, and a Crawdon, 2 of which are heavily reliant on setup. Crawdon wants to set up a Dragon Dance, probably needs to set up at least 2 Dragon Dances for it to outspeed anything. And Flygon, it's underwhelming. It got Dragon Dance, and it's still just underwhelming. Sadly, it was a Pokemon that, if it had got a Mega Evolution, probably be better than it just getting Dragon Dance. But I like the Volt Turn, Mega Diancie, Emboar. The problem is the offense just really lacks after you get through Emboar and Diancie. Even Scizor, to an extent, isn't the greatest offensive mon ever. Reliant on the Technician, Bullet Punch, Choice Band. So just needs a little bit more breaking power for my eyes for this team to actually be successful. Now, at number 12, I have the Straw Hat Swampers now. I actually thought the Mosh Posh Mesh jambalaya of teams that Pokemon that he had was, you know what, pretty solid actually. He does have a Mew Decidueye, which I think are two very versatile mons that he can run, both with different forms of setup, both with access to Baton Pass. So you can see some crazy Baton Pass shenanigans potentially in the works here for Swampert. He also has a pretty solid fairy type that nobody really talks about in the later tiers. That's just regular Diancie. It's a stealth rocker. It's fairly bulky, able to take hits pretty well. And having the fairy and rock stab moves is very beneficial typings to have, especially on a team that doesn't really have very much offensive potential, as you touched on. He doesn't really have a dedicated breaker outside of the Mega Blastoise, something that he will need to take care of soon. And there's quite a few options that I think he can go after that I saw in free agency. But you have potentials for agility pass into Blastoise, maybe nasty plot pass into Blastoise, which could be interesting. And you also got stuff like Malamar, which you don't see in the draft format, but are very exciting to see used because you get access to superpower with Contrary. If you switch it to webs, you're now +1 speed. So there's quite a few webs users, which I could see Malamar being used, and I could see it potentially used in a setup fashion to win a couple games. I think it'll win at least one game this season. But in hindsight, the team's probably a little bit lower than what I have it right now. But it's still a good team that I would actually enjoy using just because of the randomness of some of the Pokemon that you may not think fit well together, but surprisingly actually do. Number 12, I want you to break down why you have Kyle at number 12.
Okay, so for starters, I'm not going to hate on him because he's a Dolphins fan, but in the very least, I actually like this team a little bit better just because of the fact that, well, while you say his team lacks some certain offense, he does have potent wall breakers. Like for example, Cronut doesn't necessarily have to be the one to set up. At the very least, Scizor can be a sword stance sweeper. Crawdon can do sword stance. Mega Nancy is just a great Pokemon in general. Having the Volt Turn core with Jolteon. Flygon really isn't, like you said, isn't the very first Pokemon that comes to mind when it comes to having an offensive Dragon type. There are much better options that you can go for. Um, but I think it's more of the sense of not trying to get too comfortable or be too reliant on something like Shuckle to set up webs, so that way your slower stuff can outspeed certain fast stuff that you can't really deal with. He has a good priority. He has some decent bulk on his team with like a Moongus and whatnot. Mesprit can pretty much be a lot of sets, Stealth Rocks, Choice Scarf, Choice Specs. The list goes on and on. But I actually like his overall breaking potential. Kyle A is the type of person that definitely likes to draft a very offensive draft, have some sort of bulky pivots to lean on. Although he Mungus in good faith, and to a lesser extent, if you want to stretch it, Cryogonal. But I do like Kyle's offense at the very least. He does have Volturn into very powerful wall breakers. Crawdon and Scizor are not to be taken lightly just because they have very strong priority to back up his team. Same thing goes for Embor, a very potent wall breaker that doesn't have really much in terms of switch-ins. So I actually, looking at the team overall, I do like Kyle's team. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how exactly he deals with a bit more of the more offensive stuff that he can struggle a bit against, and more notably, some more bulkier teams that he would be forced to bring setup moves for that can be problematic to deal with without getting up a sword stance or two. So Moving on from there, we're moving on to number 11 in our rankings, where we both have the Rochester Ride-Ons at number 11. So again, another a few times that we are going to agree in our rankings. And with the Rochester Ride-Ons, first thing off the bat, I think he did a very solid job um, building his team around that Megalodios pick, having the Terrakion, Sylveon, and the Magnezone. Although I'm not really the biggest fan of Magnezone like some people are, but I do like the Dragon Fairy Steel Core he has going for him. The offense with the Terrakion, lower tier mons like Tauros and Tornai is also a very good boon to have on his team. And then he has the bulkier stuff like Blastoise, which appreciates the wish support from Sylveon. Same thing with like something like Spiritomb, which can be a good pursuit trapper for bulky psychic types, which stuff like Terrakion does struggle with. Double fighting core with Terrakion plus Blaziken is also interesting. Blaziken a little bit more versatile, not in that sense, but at least Blaziken can like dry pass with baton pass into something like Terrakion. Fighting spam is very potent, and Megalodios can take advantage of someone like that. I think the main thing to note about the Rochester Ride-Ons is um, I think the only real knock is kind of the Sand Slash. Like I don't see. I think he only drafted Sand Slash just for the sake of having an electric immunity, which I think he could have tried to get something a little bit better. And the Victory Bell also stands out to me as well, which is kind of just there. Like I can understand his thought process into like bringing like a self-setting Sun Sweeper, but outside of that, Victreal just kind of seems out of place. But outside of that, I do like his draft overall. I think it has a good combination of both offense and bulk to back up Megalodios in the very least. So why don't you talk about why you like the Rockets to ride on at number 11?
So you hit on a lot of the points there that he did a very good job pairing Megalodios with what it needs. So when you look at Megalodios, and I've done this through drafting, and I've actually done Megalodios Tracheon, you need something to break steel types. Yes, you get Dragon Dance Earthquake with Megalodios, but it's not a reliable option to break steel types. So what does he do? He goes out and gets a Tracheon. You know what? Very good start there, because in a 24 coach league, having multiple powerful wall breakers is a fantastic thing, because not every coach is going to have multiple answers for your wall breaking. Now, you brought up the fighting spam. Blaziken, very overlooked fire type, has the 110 physical attack, 110 special attack, or 100 special attack, I believe. So the mixed potential of Blaziken is there, especially with needing to run certain hidden powers to KO stuff, and the base 100 special attack is a very good thing for Blaziken. Now, looking at some of the other forms of offense that he does have on the team, Tornadus Eye is actually a very decent mon, with NPA being able to use any Z crystal on any Pokemon. Tornadus actually becomes a lot scarier now, because it can run Flyinium Z with potentially stuff like acrobatics sets. You can run it with Supersonic Sky Strike. So there's a lot that Tornadus Eye can do. Stuff like Prankster Bulk Up, Prankster Tailwind are very beneficial to potentially have Pokemon like Blaziken, Terrakion sweep. The only downsides I see on his team are some of the passive Pokemon. Blastoise is there, and I see it mostly as just there to rapid spin, because it's the one mistake I see with Blastoise is people mostly just draft it to be a rapid spinner. But with the rest of the team, I think he has plenty of wall breaking potential. He's going to have no issue with physical walls, special walls. Magnezone, it's one of those Pokemon that people don't like, but again, it does trap those steals in case he doesn't want to bring a Terrakion 1 week. So there's those options for him. It's a very balanced team. I actually like this team, other than that victory bell that you pointed out that's just glaring me in the face right now. Just why is this on this team? It just doesn't seem like it should be. But 11 is a very balanced, perfect spot for the Rochester Ride-Ons. And in at number 10, I have the Pittsburgh Piratas. You have them in at number 9, but for your number 10, you do have the Nashville Predators, which I had 24. So I'll let you explain first why you had them at number 10, whereas I had them at 24.
Yeah, so you touched a lot on how his team just looked very unsynergetic, like he just drafted Mons for the sake of drafting them. I think it was more so the fact that actually think it looks a lot better than some people would think, especially considering that he's trying to make a draft a team in which Blacephalon can shine, and on top of that, one of the main stops to Blacephalon being the Tyranitar, and he has multiple stuff that can definitely take on Tyranitar. Kabalion is one. Um, his own Mega T-Tar Superior can definitely do it. Klefki. Um, he doesn't really have to rely on stuff like Masquerade to set up webs. He has Noivern as a fast dragon type to make up for his sort of lackluster speed. So he's not forced to run Masquerade. Um, and some other things to note, I actually do like his lower tier stuff, as I know all too well about having Lantern and was Sharna myself in the NPA minors. But I think the more looking at Ethan's draft, I think it's more so the fact that he tried to make a team in which Blacephalon is the focal point, and I think the team did do well to the point where he has the U-turn momentum with either Noivern, slow Volturn with Lantern, Musharna, a very underrated bulky second type with access to Baton Pass and Healing Wish, so he can heal back up Blacephalon if it does get weakened, or Mega Tyranitar. And he has underrated stuff like Zangoose. Like, I do like his lower tier stuff. His higher tier stuff, Nidoking can be a pretty underrated threat, especially considering it is a very potent wall breaker with sheer force, life orb, earth power, sludge wave, all the coverage options under the sun. I think that's why I like it a lot more than you have him dead last. But overall, I think his team is fairly solid, even though it doesn't really look like on paper that it has that sort of synergetic feel that you feel like it doesn't have. So that being said, let's go into why you have the Pittsburgh Piratas at number 10.
So I'm a big fan of Volturn, and he Tup has a very good Volturn combination with a Mega that I feel like people don't give enough credit being Mega Beedrill. So you have a Mega Beedrill Zapdos Volturn core, and what do you need with Volturn? You need good offensive pressure with them, and he does have that with Zygarde 50% form and Lucario. Both are very good offensive mons to have, and both are very good setup sweepers that can find chances to set up and potentially win the game with the ability to have extreme speed. So having priority is a very important thing to have, especially when you have some frail Pokemon like Mega Beedrill, like Lucario. Now, some other stuff to point out. He's decently ground weak. He does have Zapdos, Zygarde, Lurantis that switch in to ground type moves. But you look at Empoleon, it's really good at defogging, but most of the time it's going to want to run a Shucka Berry. Having a bulky water that can't switch into ground types, it's a yellow flag. It's not really a red flag, just a yellow flag. But besides that, he also has a trick room aspect to the team that's a little overlooked, with Lurantis being able to set up Superpower Contrary or even Leaf Storm Contrary. You could see a potentially mixed Lurantis brought where he could bring Superpower Leaf Storm, or not, yeah, Leaf Storm in a Trick Room setting with Aromatisse or Reuniclus. So there's a lot of interesting aspects about Tup's team that I would like to see him use. Now, the issue is There's no real true breaker without the setup. Zygarde, I believe it's base 100 attack, not great. Lucario, to an extent, can break decently without setup, but it does like Tenacity Plot or Swords Dance. And then Mega Beedrill, most of the time with Mega Beedrill, you're clicking U-turn anyway, because most teams are going to bring Rocky Helmet Mons to start wearing it down. But all in all, I do really like the way his team is with just that hidden Trick Room aspect with the Aromatisse Lurantis and the Reuniclus, and even the Torkoal to an extent, just sitting there that many coaches might overlook. Now, for your number 9, you ended up having Tups Pyratatas. So go into a little detail on maybe what I've missed on why I have him at number 10 that might put him at number 9.
Well, I think you already touched on most of the aspects of his team. To have that Volturn core with Mega Beedrill, Zapdos, it's very, very cool having the ability to run Trick Room 2 with Ridiculous, Aromatisse, a very underrated Pokemon in this gen, especially not only to get access to Trick Room, it also gets access to Nasty Plot. So Trick Room, Nasty Plot, Aromatisse could definitely be a thing. And the other thing to know about his team is while you do say his team does lack a specific breaker, the fact that he can pivot in and out to something like a banded Zygarde is still a very, very big nuisance for opposing teams without a good ground resist. And on top of that, he also has stuff like Lucario, which can come in and be a Swords Dance or a Nasty Plot sweeper. Other than that, while his team doesn't really scream breaking potential, as you did mention, he does have some other few tricks up his sleeve. Mainly having just the fact that he does have that Ditto there to dissuade the use of setup moves against him is a very, very big boon to have, being a solid revenge killer. I think the other thing to touch on is the fact that Torkoal can be a big nuisance under Trick Room with Stab Eruption in the Sun, which can do a huge chunk of damage to any Pokemon or team that lacks a good fire resist. Um, I think the other thing to note is the fact that he does have that slacking there, which is pretty funny. So if he wants to classify that as his breaker, then by all means, go for it. But other than that, I do like the Volturn concept he has. He has the good offense with the Zygar and the Lucario and whatnot. Um, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this team is run. I do like the overall aspect of the team. It is very, very interesting and something I'm looking forward to see how Tup does in the NPA. So, from there, why don't we talk about your number 19, where you have the Chicago Cup Chews?
So, looking at the Chicago Cubs shoes, besides the basic team name, Cubs, Chicago Cubs, Cub shoes, original, you have Tapu Koko. You know, that's a very good Pokemon to start your offense with. So, can't give him a knock for picking Tapu Koko. You have Milotic, probably one of my new favorite Pokemon in the format. Nice, very good bulky water. You have Umbreon, the just annoyance that it is. It's a very good specially defensive mon paired with Milotic. You have Roserade, Spike Stack, Toxic Spike Stacker, Technician, Attacker, can be run specially defensive, very versatile, very fun mon. You have Meloetta, probably one of the Pokemon I think that's overlooked in draft format. I know I say it a lot throughout this, but Meloetta is just one of those ones that it hits very hard on the special end, but can be a very good counter to so many special attackers that aren't dark types. So that's where I see Meloetta is. It's a very nice bulky mon, and it has that pirouette form that nobody really uses. And it can be such a devastating set to be that fast and that offensive to just catch people off guard. Now for the negatives on the team. Drafting the Ariados just for the webs. To me, I didn't think this team needed sticky webs. Um, yes, he does have some speed tier discrepancies going from Coco to, I believe, Meloetta to Rose Raid and then to Garchomp. It might be Garchomp then Rose Raid, but just drafting webs for the sake of webs, especially on a Pokemon like Ariados, not too much of a fan of it. Then you get into some of the other Pokemon, Magmortar, other fire types around, like possibly even Delphox. You probably could have gotten Embor before Magmortar. So it's just one of those Pokemon that I like it on the low ladder, playing NU, PU, not Pokemon I enjoy so much in the draft league format. And then he has Donphan, which it's just there. It doesn't really seem like it fits in with the team as much. Granted, Donphan does have a very nice move pool, which will be very interesting for him as it can be offensive. I've used an offensive Donphan, so the possibility for Donphan to be a rock polish sweeper is there. So it's a nice team. I felt like it just could have been better than what it was. So in at number 8, I have the LA Landorus now. This is where you're going to start seeing kind of just my favoritism towards offensive teams post draft. You have Mega Aerodactyl, Weavile, Azelf, Latias. So you have a lot of offense happening very early on. And I felt like having that speed really helps out, knowing that you're forcing your opponent into running choice scarfs now, which is fine because he actually has some decent bulk to take on those choice scarf users with Tentacruel, Registeel, Quagsire, and even to an extent Vileplume. So now you're forcing your opponent to lock themselves into one move, play a game of predictions, which in the long run could be a very beneficial strategy. Having your opponent play head games to predict the right switch ins, knowing that they're choice locked. And when you're choice locked, now you're having to double switch, and the chances for double switches to put you into a bad situation are now increased. I think that was very good, getting that speed, but they're also wall breakers. Weavile, very good wall breaker. Azelf, physically offensive, especially offensive. Could be a nice nasty plot, could be a suicide lead. Does a lot for this team. The downside, not a very good ground resist. You look at the team, Tentacruel, Registeel, both weak to ground, Arcanine weak to ground. Vileplume takes neutral. And Quagsire, it's there. It's an unaware mon, stops setup sweepers, but anything can pack hidden power grass. A lot of Pokemon get grass knot, get energy ball, so not a lot of good grass switch ins for this team. But I think having that offensive speed presence will just be a very challenging thing for teams to take on this season. Now, in for your number 8, I want you to do just a bit of explaining on the Southampton Sharpedos because two of my bottom two teams are in your top 10.
Yeah, so with my concept with the Southampton Sharpedos is, well, you already touched on for starters, he having the Dragon Fairy Steel Core, Garchomp, Togekiss, Mega Scizor. Do love the draft. You touched on his real lack of a good fire resist, outside of like Garchomp, Alolan Marowak. Um, Slowro, in a sense, can be run like a Soul Fest or EV'd in a way so it could be a better special fire check. But I think outside of that, I think the rest of his team does kind of revolve around having that Dragon Fairy Steel Core be put in the most of the work and having the other Pokemon around it, like the Ambipom, the Skuntank, the Floator, just going to be like the main contributors of everything, just trying to facet around it, like Ambipom providing U-turn and a fast attacker, Skuntank with defog, priority with Sucker Punch. Um, but outside of the kind of the fire resist, which is going to be falling a lot on Alolan Marowak for the most part, as Garchomp doesn't really want to take does resist fire, but at the same time doesn't want to risk being burned because it is a very potent physical attacker. I think outside of that, I do like the aside from the Dragon Fairy Steel Core, I do like the rest of the bulk on his team. He has some good speed with the Ambipom, the Floatzel. I like the priority that his team does have. Um, and other than that, his team does look fairly solid. Outside of that, like you said, other than the fire resist, can't really say much other negatives about it, to be perfectly honest. So, with that being said, let's move on to our number 7 on the power rankings, where we both have Crimson Seabad and the Detroit type nulls. So, touching a bit on the Detroit type nulls, his team has the Celesteela Mega Altaria combination. So he has that going for him. He has some pretty good speed tiers with the Excel Gore. He has the Gengar, potential Sticky Web with the Araquanid, um, another good fast Pokemon like Zimstrika, potential Scarfer with Hitmonlee, a bulky Pokemon like Uxie, which does get a special move called not special move, but a move called Memento, and he just so happened to have that Linoon all the way at the bottom, which can be a very, very huge nuisance to opposing team, which I think is going to be the main beneficiary of the Memento support. Same thing does apply to the Celesteela and the Mega Altaria, making it easier for them to set up Autotomizers and Dragon Dances respectively. Same thing can be applied to someone like Scrafty. Not I'm not really that fond of Scrafty, but it does fit his team considering he does need a sort of rock check. He didn't really have a rock resist outside of Hitmonlee, which doesn't really want to be taking any hits, to be perfectly honest. So, kind of weird seeing double fighting types, but he does have the resistances to deal with fairy type with the Celesteela, the Gengar. Overall, I do like his team as a whole. Um I think it's gonna be like very very interesting to see how this team works out against some other potent physical attackers, like something like Weavile. I know we've been bringing up Weavile quite a bit throughout this these power rankings, but I think his main switch into something like Weavile will be something like Intimidate, Scrafty, physically defensive. So it's gonna be interesting to see how he handles these sorts of fast, hard hitting Pokemon on this draft. So why don't you talk about why you have, let's say, Detroit Type Knowles at number 7?
So you did touch on this Fairy Dragon Steel, Celesteela Mega Altaria. I like it. It's a good start. And it's a pretty just easy way to pick up wins with two Mons that can set up and end games. Now, Altaria got nerfed a little bit, but didn't affect it much. Now, I want to get into the negatives before I get into the positives on Crimson's team. You have two forms of hazard removal, one being Hitmonlee, the other being Mega Altaria with Defog. That is it. You have three weaknesses to Stealth Rocks: Excelgor, Araquanid, and Mega Altaria pre-Mega Evolution. You have one resistance to Stealth Rocks, that is Hitmonlee. Having a team with two bug types that get worn down relatively easy, along with Mega Altaria, to me was a kind of just like an orange flag. We're approaching red flag status on that. But now for the positives. You brought up Uxie Memento. Well, that Uxie can now go into Celesteela, which forces switches and sets up. Gengar, which forces switches and sets up a substitute. Scrafty, which forces some switches and sets up a Dragon Dance. Linoon sets up a Belly Drum and then sweeps. So I thought Crimson has a very underrated team in terms of Pokemon that he drafted. We all know Celesteela is a very good Pokemon. I'm not going to argue with that. But he also has paired it with some good Pokemon like Mega Altaria, which has seen a decrease in usage in the draft league community. Araquanid, which is a very good fire resist for Celesteela. and some other Pokemon like Piloswine, very good Stealth Rocker, Priority, pretty decent Breaker with Earthquake and Icicle Crash. So there's not much negative on Crimson's team other than two forms of hazard removal, which means that Rapid Spin normal gym Hitmonlee set will be seen multiple times throughout the season. It's going to be something that coaches are going to expect, seeing as he only has Rapid Spin Hitmonlee and the Defog Mega Altaria. But all in all, very, very solid team for Crimson. Now, moving on to number 6, where I have John and the New York Pelipers. You have John and the New York Pelipers. New Pelipers are not New York, New Pelipers. Caught myself there. Sorry, John. It's the New Orleans Pelipers. I look at John's team. Oh my fatness. That is the first thing I look at that team. I see a Skarmory, a Conkeldurr, a Primarina, a Mudsdale, Megalodios, Serena. I just see fatness. And I'm actually okay with it because he can make them even more fat with Light Screen Electrode. He can set up Toxic Spikes with Cofagrigus. Having a spin blocker plus a rapid spinner is very nice to keep hazards up on his side of the field. And more importantly, he has 3 Pokemon that can force so many switches. You have Primarina, which is a very good breaker. Not many things switch into a Primarina, especially with the coverage it got. I hate Poplio, but Primarina is an absolute monster when it comes to breaking. Then you look at some of the other stuff that break on his team. Conkeldurr. So Conkeldurr is just one of those Pokemon that early Gen 6 everybody loved using. Even into Gen 5, it was a very good fighting type. Kind of saw a decrease once we got the Tapus and stuff, but it's still a Pokemon that if you don't prep for it, it will beat you. Now, Megalodios is there. Everybody knows how just annoying Megalodios is, how bulky it is. Knockoff doesn't do anything to it. It can set up Calm Minds. It gets access to Defog, Recovery. So his team is fat, but it's going to work out so beneficial for his play style. And just to have that breaking ability. Now, he does have a Trick Room potential. Don't overlook that. As he does have the Trick Room Cofagrigus, he does have Exploud, he does have Mudsdale, Primarina, all of which are not the fastest. And he has one of my top 5 favorite Pokemon of all time, Absol. You're now getting into Swords Dance, Sucker Punch games, Pursuit Trapping. Very, very fat, but a very fun team John has. Anything else you want to add to that?
So to add on to the thickness, as you've mentioned, this is kind of a team that I actually would like to use. Just having that ability to bring as much bulk as you need, and on top of that, his lack of speed, in a sense, is mitigated by the fact that he does have the Electrode, which is already fast enough to the point where it can run modest and still outspeed whatever it needs to outspeed. Salazzle, solid fire type Pokemon for his draft. Having that Volturn core with Serena into Electro, and then Megalodios has been surrounded by great Pokemon, not just having that bulk like Skarmory, Primarina, Mudsdale. Just having the ability to have that Stealth Rock option with Skarmory or Mudsdale, the spike, more importantly, the toxic spikes with Cofagrigus was pretty much the biggest boon for Pokemon's team. Just having the ability to wear down opposing bulky offensive teams is just very nice to have, which complements the rest of his team fairly well. Um, and on top of that, he does have some Conkeldurr, which makes up for the lack of um, more natural speed, getting access to Mach Punch, and with the nerf the burn nerf guts boosted Mach Punch from a Conkeldurr is going to hurt. And it's going to hurt a lot, especially if he's able to give some Stealth Rock and Spike support. So overall, I do love Pokemon's draft. It's one of those drafts where you have to prep for everything. He has the bulk, he has the wall breakers, and more importantly, he has the team that can pretty much make Mega Latias shine, which I feel as though is going to be very, very exceptional. So, with that being said, let's move on to the top five in our power rankings, where we both have the Durham Druddigons and 6 Foot Hacks at number five. So, Leo's draft, my God, first 4 months I see a Mega Gallade, I see a Manaphy, a Mamoswine, and then it gets that last round Hydreigon. Now that is a powerful squad right there. Having the ability to be a setup Swords Dance with Mega Gallade, Tailglow Z Manaphy is going to be an absolute monster. Mamoswine is already a force in and of itself, and then Hydreigon just having another good solid attacker, which can be a choice scarf user, a life orb attacker, and the Pokemon that forms around those four. Stuff like Slurpuff, which gets access to Sticky Web now, can be a belly drum sweeper, so another threat to look out for. Rotomo, another defogger, very very solid threat with momentum with Volt Switch. I really love Garbodor, just having another ability way of getting up hazards with spikes and toxic spikes, and having that toxic spikes absorber makes it easier on stuff like Manaphy and Steelix, a very underrated stealth rocker. Now the rest of his draft I do like in the sense that he has some very very powerful breakers like Tyrantrum, and I think the only questionable one is he has that Hypno, but Hypno can do some things. It can baton pass, it can calm mind, baton pass, nasty pass, stuff like that. But overall, I really do like the draft. I feel like he has a good combination of breaking power. He has a good priority, very strong priority at that. He has the good speed. He has the wall breakers. He has the bulk. And this is really what I think is definitely a top five draft. So, anything else you want to touch on the Durham Jordigons draft?
So he did what I like from a couple coaches in these 24 coach drafts. Grab the wall breakers, get the bulk late, but grab the most wall breakers you can. What did Leo do? He got a Manaphy. He got a Mamoswine. He got a Hydreigon. He got a Mega Gallade. That's 4 wall breakers right there. Now, some wall breakers to not overlook. Slurpuff. Belly Drum Slurpuff is a real thing. It can also win games. So it's not the greatest fairy. And he would probably tell you that he had other fairies in mind that he wanted, but it works well with his team. And when you look at some of the other stuff that he has on his team, you have Garbodor for Spike Stack. Decent. It's also has a decent ability with Aftermath. So if he wants to use it as a sack to something, Rocky Helmet Aftermath to pretty much take away what would be about 35% of a Pokemon's health, which opens the door up to one of his wall breakers, finishing it off with a KO. You have Steelix, a very good steel type, with a bit to set up Stealth Rocks. Low-key underrated Sheer Force user. Unless Leo wants to really go into the heat, there's this special Sheer Force Steelix, which can be overlooked a little bit. But all in all, I mean, it's just a very good team for being 24 coaches, pretty much not getting a pick for 48 picks in most cases. To get this type of squad is a fantastic thing to have happen, and a player of his caliber should be able to use this team to full effectiveness this season. Now, number 4, this is where our top 5 start to become a little bit different, but for the most part the same. I have the Adelaide Haunch Crows. a team that you had way back down at number 16. You explained your reasonings for it. Not great bulk. For me, Sand offense plus Charizard Y holds such a special spot in my heart. It's also one of those offensive presences that are just so hard to actually prepare for. You know it's coming. The issue is trying to stop it. Having the dual weather is such a fantastic thing to have versus opponents' teams, but she also matches it up well with some very good support Pokemon. You look at Whimsicott being able to stop setup sweepers with Encore. You have Z Memento Whimsicott to potentially heal a Mega Charizard Y or an Excadrill that got weakened or burned. You also have Drapion, a Pursuit Trapper, which could be a very beneficial Pokemon to have along with a Toxic Spike Setter, pretty much just to wear down opposing teams, just having the hazards to wear down your opposing teams and have this sand offense can be such a big advantage for the Adelaide Honchcrows. And after that, you still have more good breaking ability. Nasty Plot Raichu. You have Curum just sitting there with Dragon and Ice stab moves, being able to damage a lot of teams. And you have Sticky Webs. This is where, in instance, Sticky Webs are a very good thing because they are not there for the sole purpose of Sticky Webs. There's more aspects to the team than just the Sticky Webs. And then you have the Keldeo that's just sitting there by itself that can do a lot of damage to opposing teams, like you said, being the Revenge Killer or being the Choice Specs breaking set. So it's a team that I am very high on and very excited to watch this season. So, in for your number 4, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you have the Seattle Sea Kings?
So with the Seattle Sea Kings, the main thing that's just you look at his draft and you see a Kieran Black, lovely. You have a Mega Medicham, a very potent wall breaker, and then you see he also has that Kartana, very very solid wall breakers on Jodor's part and I absolutely love the fact that he has these three Pokemon at his disposal. And not to mention his support Pokemon are absolutely phenomenal. Especially, I really, really love Nidoqueen with this draft, just being able to set up Stealth Rock and be a Toxic Spike setter just to wear down those threats that all three of these Pokemon do face. And they do also benefit each other pretty nicely, considering the fact that Mega Medicham does struggle a bit with bulky psychic types. Kartana now gets access to knockoff, so it does pressure those psychic types a lot better. Um, the main knock probably for Jodor probably would be the fact that all of his breakers are more of a physically oriented facet, but I think that also benefits him because of the fact that opponents will have to bring physically defensive stuff, physically defensive Pokemon to deal with Kieran Black, Mega Medicham, and Kartana. The nice thing is the fact that Kieran Black doesn't have to be fully physically offensive to be a potent wall breaker. It does have access to Ice Beam. It can do special sets, special covers like Earth Power and whatnot. So overall, I do like the structure of his draft. Can't really complain about it. Outside of that, he does have some pretty cool options in terms of other support. He does have some good momentum with the Rotom Heat. He has some good bulk with the Jellicent. Incineroar is pretty potent. I mean, I do wish it got Intimidate, which would have been even better, but I don't know really much about double fire types on this team that doesn't really have much removal outside of like default Kartana and Armaldo. I think Comfey gets it. I'm not entirely sure about that. Um, but outside of that, I do like how his team is structured. So why don't you talk about we go into our number 3 picks here, where I have the Maryland Torterrapins and you have the Seattle Sea Kings. So why don't you touch up a little bit on why you have Jodor's team a little bit higher than I do.
So, Fairy Dragon Steel Core is very good. Kieran Black, Kartana, and Comfy overlooked. Another just overlooked Pokemon. Priority healing with different fairy moves, very good thing to have. Kieran Black, and you touched on that. It could be special, it could be physical. And the wall breaking on this team, this is what I like to see. This is very reminiscent of what I carried in the MP AAA. Kieran Black, Mega Metacham. What is a wall? Now you add in Kartana, that if it gets a kill, your walls don't matter anymore because of that base 181 special attack. So his wall breaking is absolutely fantastic. I think he's going to have very little trouble dealing with opposing teams' fatness. But I think things that are holding him back are like what you said. It is physically offensive heavy. Not a lot of special attacking on this team, and I would like to see Joder maybe get a special attacker that can help balance this team a little bit more and possibly even put it in at number 1. Another negative, your removal is Rotom and Armaldo. Rotom Heat takes 25% from rocks. Armaldo takes 25% from rocks. Having hazard removal weak to stealth rocks is a no-no. That is a red flag for me. But with the offensive presence he has on his team, I can let that one slide. Now for your number 3, you can break down why you have the Maryland Torterrapins there.
Okay, so for the Maryland Torterrapins, the first thing you just look at, and he has first and foremost, he has that double genie core, Lando T, Thunderous T. Dealing with one of them is already pretty much a hassle. Dealing with two of them, an even bigger hassle, especially considering what both can do on the offensive side of the battle, with Lando T being able to do Sword Dance, Rock Polish with Fly EMZ. Same thing with Fundy T being able to do Agility or Nasty Plot with electric Z move, and having the ability to pivot in and out, and having a wall breaker like Mega Heracross in the back. That is a scary, scary threat in and of itself, just because it's a hard hitting Pokemon, and having something like Lando T and Thundy T to pivot in and out of on a regular basis, and then having other support Pokemon that does the same thing. Celebi can be that's a stealth rocker. It can baton pass. It can U-turn. Alolan Persian can parting shot into Mega Heracross. It can get up a sub and make it that much harder to deal with. Um, Other than that, though, and then he also has the Rabombi too, which he didn't really need webs on this particular team, but the fact that he even has the option to run webs and then he has Mega Heracross as a wall breaker, that just makes his team so much more deadly. The only real knock is the fact that he does have some couple of Pokemon weak to ice. The Double G needs to Celebi the Golbat for removal, but he does have the Vaporeon to lean on in terms of ice type attacks. Not really much so in the case of something like Freeze Dry, but other than that, um, Kelly's team is very, very potent offensively and very, very scary to deal with. So that's why I have him number 3. So, so moving on from that, we're now going to go into the top 2 teams for us. So with my number 2, I have the Minnesota Vikavolt, and Johnny has the Maryland Torterrapins. So first, why don't we touch on why you have Kelly at number 2 while I have number 3?
So when I look at Kelly's team, you have 3 really good wall breakers that are not reliant on setup. Landorus, Thunderous, Mega Heracross. Just naturally, they have extremely good breaking power. But now we look at what else Kelly's team can do. He has good setup options. Landorus Therian, dual dance. Thunderous Therian can dual dance, but doesn't really need to with base 145 special attack. And Rabombi can set up. So That's an overlooked aspect of Rabombi. Yes, it can get webs, but it's not a webs user. It is a quiver dance user, which is a very good thing. It just needs to run quiver dance, bug buzz. I believe it's dazzling gleam, and whatever type of coverage move it needs for switch ins. The downsides of Kelly's team that held him back from being number one. Golbat is your hazard removal. I know it's 24 teams, but at least get some form of decent hazard removal. Golbat shut down by taunt. If you taunt a Golbat, you are pretty much stuck with no hazard removal. I don't really want to consider Landorus Therian a hazard remover. Yes, it does get defog, but to me, it's not really a defogger. And then your fairy type is Rabombi, which is not a reliable fairy type. It's kind of the same situation Leo is. It is a fairy type by definition, but it's not the ideal fairy type for the team. Now, I do love the way it is mixed in with this team. I think it'll be very deadly and an overlooked sweeper compared to some of the other threats on Kelly's team. But for your number two, explain the blasphemy that is putting the ridiculousness of Dan's team at number two.
Yeah, I know I'm going to get some hate from some of the fans of the Minnesota Viking Volunteer, but hear me out first. Um, I know some people are going to be like, but he's a defending a champion. Why isn't he number one for you? Well, the thing is I didn't put him number one because I didn't like his team to be verified as number one. For the most part, this is a very A drive like team. It is bulky offense. It doesn't care much for speed for having a fast Pokemon at all. Um, it has a lot of the things that he's really accustomed to, mainly once again getting access to using Victini and Salamence again. But it really has all the things that A Drive looks for in a draft. Um, Having that powerful wall breaker, he has Victini under his disposal again. Speed, his fastest Pokemon being the Alolan Ninetales, and to a lesser extent, speed boost Sharpedo, which is something he does like to do. He likes having that momentum. He has parting shot from Silvally. He has Volt Switch on Rotom. Mega Mawile gets access to Baton Pass. Victini can U-turn. Um, so there's that going for him. He has that slow bulky pivot with access to Baton Pass. That's Mega Mawile. So probably the reason why I didn't put him number one was kind of not saying that his team wasn't warranted number one, but I just want him to show me that this team that he got here is good enough that he can repeat. And I'm not saying that he can't do it, but it's more so the fact that he does have the breakers, he has the Victini, he has the Salamence. The Mega Mawile for sure is going to be a very, very big nuisance for teams trying to prep for Mega Mawile. And the great thing about having Mega Mawile is the stuff that normally would wall Mega Mawile, like a bulky steel type. Mega Mawile does get access to Fire Fang. Something like Celesteela wants to try to resist its dual stab, it can run Thunder Punch. And on top of that, he also paired up with Salamence and Victini, two Pokemon in which you could not ask for a better combination for. And on top of that, Salamence get access to Tailwind. Alolan Ninetales can Aurora Veil and make it a lot more harder for it to take down. Mega Mawile can intimidate before Mega Evolving, and Mega Evolve they can Sword Stance and then potentially SD Baton Pass into something like some a Scarf Moxie Vent, which is a very very scary thought now that I think about it. But other than that, I think the rest of his team is very very solid. It's going to be interesting to see how he uses some more of the stuff that he hasn't used before, like the Sharpedo as like a late game sweeper, stuff like Verition, which I've never seen him use. But I am liking the draft. I didn't put him number one, like I said, because um, I didn't really think like along the lines of um, having this particular guy number one. I want him to prove that him winning the title last season was no fluke. So why don't we go to why you have A Drive at number one? Although I can pretty much venture a guess at why you do.
So this isn't fandom. This is pretty much an exact team I would draft. So we're looking at your first pick. We got Mega Mawile. Argue with it. It's going to break walls. It's going to destroy teams. Mega Mawile's there. It can be also run bulky with Stealth Rocks. I've seen that as well from a lot of players. Let's get into these next two picks. Salamence and Alolan Ninetales. Underrated combo. Why? You set up an Aurora Veil. Salamence is getting at least 2 Dragon Dances up now. And with Moxie, Salamence is probably winning the game. It is just a pair that I find fantastic. I love the combination of Salamence plus Alolan Ninetales. I think it just can decimate teams. Aurora Veil is probably one of the most annoying moves in the entire Draft League community, simply because it can last for turns after Hail is gone. That is one of the things that annoyed me most by playing against it, but it's also one of the things I loved using with it is you could set it up on your last turn of Hail. Now you have 8 turns of it with a light clay in which your team is going to benefit from it. Now, it doesn't just benefit Salamence. It benefits Mega Mawile. It benefits Dan's. I know Dan's a bug catcher, but it benefits his Victini. He loves his Victinis. Having Victini behind an Aurora Veil means it's going to live quite a few hits, which is very good. He does have Rotom, very solid defogger, along with Silvally. Access to Parting Shot to get into Salamence, which is probably going to set up forcing a switch, or it's going to be a Choice Scarf variant and KO stuff and then get Moxie boosts. You have Seismitoad, a very overlooked bulky water, Stealth Rocks, something that Dan has that I love from drafts. He now forces opponents into thinking about HP Ice or HP Grass. It's something that I don't see in a lot of teams. They draft 2 HP Ice weaknesses, 2 HP Grass weaknesses. Dan did it right here, getting Salamence, HP Ice, Seismitoad, HP Grass. Now players have to think about which one of those 2 hidden powers they have to bring against Dan's team. Now, the negatives, his team isn't fast. Alolan Ninetales, Virizion, 108, that's his fastest. Which, you know what, with the way his team's formatted, is probably okay, seeing as he has bulk, but he has a lot of offense on this team. Looking at some of his lower tier picks, Kecleon is a god. It can do so much between setting up Hazard with Stealth Rocks, access to 3 different forms of priority, Fake Out, Sucker Punch, Shadow Sneak, Protean, access to all the elemental punches, good special move pool, very good specially defensive with base 120. Dan pretty much drafted a carbon copy of a team I would draft 10 out of 10 times. I've drafted, I think, everything on this team, on the same team, but a Virizion, which I had sniped from me. So, I mean, seeing this draft, it was just, I like this draft. So, I mean, that's why I had to put him at number 1, just simply because it synergizes so well. Aurora Veil will always be in a top 10 because of how annoying, but how good that move is, especially on a team with set of sweepers like Mawile and Salamence. But for your number 1, a bit of a surprise. You had the Chicago Cub Shoes, which surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, so another thing I didn't touch on when I was talking about the Minnesota Vikings, for my top two teams, there was one word that pretty much describes both of their teams that I didn't really touch on with Adri's draft, and I'm talking about with Elliot's draft, and that one word that they both share is purpose. Every Pokemon on their team, whether it be unconventional or otherwise, has a purpose. This and the reason why I put the Cubs number one was because that's that team that Elliot has that purpose. Between Tapu Koko being a fast Pokemon with access to a Volt Switch U-turn, it knows its role. Milotic, bulky defensive water type, knows its role. Donphan, stealth rocker, rapid spinner, priority with Ice Shard, has its role. Miss Magus, spin blocker, pretty fast special attacker. You know what it's going to do. Saint Magmortar, maybe unconventional as some people, but it is a very hard hitting fire type, and it can be a very bulky Pokemon on the special side with like a Assault Vest. Ariados, I know you touched upon that it's just there solely for webs, but the fact that webs is there combined with something like Mega Garchomp, which is very uncommon in draft format, but in the league like this, it does value some creativity on some ends. Mega Garchomp can benefit from Sticky Web from Ariados as unconventional as it may seem. Umbreon is going to be a wish passer. It's going to be keeping stuff healthy like Magmortar. It knows its role. It has access to Baton Pass, so it can be a slow pivot. Roserade, great Pokemon for being access to spikes, toxic spikes. Status Absorber, another water check, a fairy check. Um, Meloetta, you touched on again, very underrated Pokemon, especially not just for the Aria form, but I think Pirouette form can also put in a lot of work as not many people are going to prep for Meloetta and expect him to expect Elliot to try to go for the Relic Song into Pirouette form and sweep, and especially considering Meloetta gets considerably faster with base 128. But the last Pokemon he has here is the fact that he does have the also creative and also coveted Coco Lucha core, which is very, very annoying. Very considering the fact that you have something that benefits from electric terrain. He has that sort of offensive core that you're looking for. And while his team doesn't really have that wall breaking potential, um, overall his team is as balanced, if not a little bit better in my eyes at least, than Dan's draft. Even though Dan does have access to Aurora Veil, making it easier for setup mons, Elliot doesn't really have to go in that direction because he can wear things down with his bulk, with the ability to run my low take to wear some stuff down. Don Fan can wear some things down. Same thing with Miss Mages, Tapu Koko. Mega Garchomp is a very unexpected Pokemon, especially from a wall breaking standpoint. But overall, you can't go wrong, and I can easily have Dan number one. But I decided to put Elliot number one just so we would have that sort of conflicting of opinions. But more so, like I said, I just like the structure that he has with this draft. So you really can't go wrong either way in having either coach one number one or number two.
Or in my case, number nine.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, granted, I did do these before the Halucha transaction post draft, which is why I had no mention of the Jacoco core, which I'm also a very big fan a very big fan of watching.
Yeah, I think even so, I think like if he was able to get like some sort of steel type, that would be even better. Like he could drop Ariados and try to get some sort of steel type, that would be absolutely perfect for him. But uh that is pretty much gonna be it. Any other last words you want to say before we sign off?
No, it's gonna be an actually pretty interesting season because there's not really top heavy teams because teams 1 through I want to say probably even 12 to 13 are very balanced just in terms of post draft. Teams 14 through 24, they have some transactions they can make that can affect them to improve their team. Granted, we're just analysts; they don't take our opinions very seriously, but
Nor nor that they should.
um, they're in the NPA for a reason. We're analysts for a reason, so they gotta.
So
Think.
so yeah, if you like hold it, don't please don't hold it against us if you feel as though your favorite team should be a little bit higher than we have them ranked. We just rank them based on how we see the teams and whatnot after the draft ended and any post transactions that happened afterwards. So don't hold it against us.
Yeah, that's one thing, guys. Remember, we're analysts. This is our opinions. Everybody's opinions will be different on where the team should be ranked, except for Kyle because he is that Dolphins fan. So, with that, guys, we are going to sign off for the night. And we will be back next week with the week 1 power rankings for you guys.